Good evening. Good evening out there, and welcome to a special meeting of the Oak Harbor City Council. Today is July 9th. It is 6 p.m. I'd like to call our special meeting to order, and it is special because normally we have our first meeting of the month on the first Tuesday, and because of the 4th of July, we're doing it on the second Tuesday, and it's special, but I know you think all of our meetings are special, right? Well, we do. So anyway, welcome. We'll start our meeting tonight. I invite you to stand for an invocation tonight led by Pastor Ron Lawler from Family Bible Church, and I will follow that with a Pledge of Allegiance. Pastor Lawler?
Will you bow with me in prayer? Dear wise and loving Father, first let me say thank you on behalf of all who are gathered here today. Thank you for your many and abundant blessings. Thank you for life itself, for the measure of health we need to fulfill our callings and sustenance, and for friendship. Thank you for the ability to be involved in useful work and for the honor of bearing appropriate responsibilities. Thank you as well for the freedom to embrace you or the freedom to reject you. And thank you for loving us even so from your boundless and gracious nature. In the scriptures you have said that citizens ought to obey the governing authorities, since you have established those very authorities to promote peace and order and justice. Therefore, I pray for our mayor, for the members of the city council, and I'm asking that you would graciously grant them wisdom to govern amid the conflicting interests and issues of our times, a sense of the welfare and true needs of our people, a keen thirst for justice and righteousness, confidence in what is good and fitting, the ability to work together in harmony even when there is honest disagreement, and for personal peace in their lives and joy in their task. I pray for the agenda set before them today. Please give an assurance of what would please you and what would benefit those who live and work in and around our beloved city of Oak Harbor. It's in your most blessed name I pray. Amen.
Nice job, Pastor Lawler. Please join me in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, I believe that Councilor Heisen is on her way. She has notified us she'll just be a tad bit late, so we don't have to excuse anyone. We'll move on to the approval of the agenda. Does anybody have any? Okay, no change in the agenda, so it'll be approved as presented. We'll move forward to Section 2, presentations. And tonight we have under honors and recognitions, we have an oath of office for a new sergeant. Chief Dresker, I'll let you take it away.
Okay, Mayor, council members, thank you. I once again get to give the oath of office and see if I can get through that properly with who we're going to have up here today. So, Officer Jim Hoagland, if you could come forward, please. And I'm going to move this over. If you could come over here, Jim. Okay, so we had a retirement, and it was Lloyd, who's gone now, and he's been gone for a while, and we miss him, but we're happy to always cycle in promotional opportunities. So we have standing before you today Officer Jim Hoagland, who is starting it off right in his promotional opportunity because he's on vacation today and for the next number of days. No, we're very happy to have Jim selected for this next sergeant position to replace Lloyd. Jim has been with the department. He was a reserve for, and I'm going to get this wrong, I know, 6 years with Oak Harbor PD. He left for 4 years, and then he was hired, and he's been with Oak Harbor PD for 19 years. Jim was a detective for work patrol. He was a detective for about 8 years. And then last year, he was selected as our school resource officer. So he's been serving in that capacity for the last school year. And so, of course, we've selected a new school resource officer, and I believe he's actually out in the hallway, which is Jeremy Andriano, who's going to be performing that role next year. So we're excited for that, changes and new opportunities. So Jim is here today, and we're going to go through the oath of office and do the rest of that process. So Jim, if you would turn and face me and raise your right hand. If you want to read from that, you can afterwards, so I don't mess it up. Okay, so I state your name.
I, James L. Hoagland,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I am a citizen of the United States and the state of Washington,
that I am a citizen of the United States and state of Washington,
and that I will support the Constitution and the laws of the state of Washington,
and that I will support the Constitution
United States,
and the laws of the United States,
the Constitution and the laws of the state of Washington,
the Constitution and the laws of the state of Washington,
and the ordinances of the city of Oak Harbor,
and the ordinances of the city of Oak Harbor,
and that I will, to the best of my judgment, skill, and ability,
and that I will, to the best of my judgment, skill, and ability,
truly and faithfully, diligently and impartially,
truly, faithfully, diligently, and impartially
perform the duties of sergeant
perform the duties of sergeant
for the Oak Harbor Police Department
in the Oak Harbor Police Department
and the city of Oak Harbor, Washington.
and the city of Oak Harbor, Washington.
As such duties are prescribed by law and ordinance,
And such duties are prescribed by law and ordinance.
and I further swear
And I further swear
that I shall diligently and faithfully
that I shall diligently and faithfully
carry out the lawful directives of the duly constituted authorities
carry out the lawful directives of the duly constituted authorities
for the city of Oak Harbor,
for the city of Oak Harbor,
and that I shall abide by
and that I shall abide by
the conduct rules of Law Enforcement Code of Ethics, so help me God.
conduct rules of the Law Enforcement Code of Ethics, so help me God.
Nice job. So before I do the rest, we're going to have a badge pinning here, and I'm going to let Jim introduce his family.
So tonight, my son Jacob Hoagland will be fitting my badge, along with my wife Lisa, who's also present.
Okay, do you have the badge? I do not have it. Meg? Here you go. We're going to do it with a cheese badge then. Just stuck here. Wow. There's the sergeant's badge. Okay. There you go. Do you really though? Thank you, Carl. So the nice thing about those little goof ups is when he's a sergeant, his shift has those, he's got to correct those things. You know, I was going to put on here that instead of the oath of office, it was going to be do whatever the captain tells me to do. But I didn't put that on there. And actually, I'll just mention briefly, so, and it's interesting because I was just at a process over in Mount Vernon, and one of the other law enforcement people there made a comment that, you know, sergeants are critical and make a department. And everybody within a department makes a department, but sergeant position is very critical because they're first line supervisors. They're out there daily with the line staff and working with them, helping them, leading them, giving them direction, holding them accountable, being held accountable, that medium point between the city administrative side and that line officer side. So it's a very critical function. I've been very fortunate and happy with the promotions that we've made here, and I look forward to Jim's work. I'm also want to make sure I thank, we have a lot of police officers. I always stand up. We need a bigger chamber room, by the way, chambers, but we got a lot of officers here from the department. Come on in, guys. Come on, come on, come on. Including a couple that will be on Sergeant Hoagland's squad that he'll be supervising. We also have the two gentlemen you see in bikes are our downtown public safety bike patrols, have been out for about 5 days, heavily on bikes. And Sergeant Nero, we have night squad, and we have a lot of officers come here to watch us. Additionally, if you're a former police officer for Oak Harbor or a former employee for the Oak Harbor Police Department, raise your hand. Come on there, Tim. And we've got some valuable cab members and community members and volunteers, but you know, this show of support for Sergeant Hoagland is fantastic. We appreciate it, and I'd like to thank everybody for being here. Sergeant Hoagland, this is your certificate of promotion. I'm going to read it. By the power vested in me and the recognition of your trust, loyalty, and professional service to the department and to the citizens of the city of Oak Harbor, I hereby promote James Hoagland to sergeant. We are going to miss Jim as an SRO. The school said don't promote Jim. I couldn't quite do that though. So we've got that process as you as council all know. We're looking forward in January sometime after that to do another promotional opportunity. So Jim's got a lot of work to do after he gets back from vacation and working with his squad and getting things going. Anything else, guys? All right, and it's back to you, council.
Thank you, Chief. I think we're going to take about a 5-minute recess here to congratulate our new sergeant. So we'll come back at 6:15.
Again, if you guys.
Yes, we did. Good. He's teaching sailing for a kid camp. He works with the high school team in the fall and the spring, and then he's in charge of the kid camp during the summer. So that's his love after retirement. He just retired like a year ago.
Okay, I'd like to call the special meeting for July 9th back to order. Chief, since you mentioned that cake across the street, I think that we've lost most of
cleared it all out, yeah.
most of our audience.
I'm
but
gone too.
We are now on we're still in section 2, moving on to C, community presentations. And our first presentation of the evening is the 2018 Annual Police Community Advisory Board presentation. And we have Cheryl Lawler here.
Thank you, Mayor.
Sure.
I'm here to present about the Community Advisory Board. I am the chairperson for 2019, and the report we're giving is for the year 2018. The next slide, you will see who the members were on our board. And as you can see by that first slide, that our purpose is police, citizens, and partnership, and we do that through this board. We seek to have members on our board that represent various areas of the community, whether it's a resident or non-resident, students, which we have a really wonderful young man who's a student that's on our board. Then we have business managers. So we try to represent as much of the demographics of our community as possible. The next slide will show our board. These are our pictures. They're really lovely. We're all going to make the yearbook. So according to what the police admin wrote, the members of the CAB provide a valuable service by providing information and understanding for both the police department and the community. They provide insight as the department consistently works to strengthen community ties and participation to work together on activities which affect the quality of life of Oak Harbor. And this is a board that was established by an ordinance in September of 1991. And one of the main purposes was to enhance community relationships, apprise the mayor and city council and the chief of police of community needs for police services, and hold public meetings to solicit public input. And here's where I'd like to share that if you ever want to, as a member of our community or council or mayor, attend one of our meetings, we would love to have you participate and share your thoughts and insights or hear what we're talking about. Often the police chief or one of the captains will come and tell us what they're doing, and it helps us keep apprised so that when community members ask us, what do you do? Or they're complaining about something, because people do that sometimes, we can share that back and forth with the police and the mayor, and that's been a really good thing. and we do hold those public meetings, and it's really a great opportunity. But we have no authority over personnel, just to make sure the community understands that, or police-related incidents. So we are just serving as an advisory board, helping be a liaison between the community and the police department. The CAB this past year worked on issues about including awareness of community concerns, and those were regarding homeless camps, mental health resources, drug problems in our community, and impact on local businesses. And so we have worked with the police to understand that and do our part to understand that and help be a liaison with the community. The police department is very good at working with the CAB board to keep us informed of what's happening with the police department, whether it's our staffing shortages we've had or the changing requirements for police officers and law enforcement. The department works to keep the CAB informed of the challenges about a variety of things, and the department also helps us understand the improvements they're making and the goals the department is working on. And two of the goals the department is working on right now is the accreditation process and the 5+2 program and the core values for the police department. The CAB also assists the police department on National Night Out, which is held the first Tuesday night of every August. And we come and interact with the community. Many times we've handed out little cards so people know that you don't call 911 if you just want to know who the dog catcher is. Okay, you call another number. And so we do things like that to help the community understand that you call 911 for real emergencies, but there's other numbers you can call. And so we try to help with that communication. And I think we meet, like I said, every other month. And the meetings are posted on our website, 4:15 at the Oak Harbor PD training room. And for anyone interested, we will have a meeting next Tuesday at 4:15. Thank you for this opportunity.
Okay. We will now move on to the second item under community presentations, the 2018 annual Police Department report. Chief Dresker.
Thank you. Before I get started on that, I'd just like to thank the cab members for being here. Sometimes I think with boards, there can be questions as to what directions to go and how involved to get in what. And you know, we recently met and talked about some of that, and with the mayor and city administrator, and so it's good to have those conversations. And I know from our current board, they're willing to take on anything type of a thing. So it's refreshing, and it's nice to work with everybody there. So I appreciate what you do, even if sometimes, you know, we got to figure out exactly which direction. So thank you for that. So I'm here to present the 2018 annual report for the police department. I'm going to go through, I think it's 12 slides. I believe that all of you received in the packet the 31 or 32 page annual report. It's a little modified from the years past, which is fine. And I'm not going to go over that entire report. You can certainly ask me questions if you'd like to. I think you also received this copy of our strategic plan for the department moving forward. Although that's not 2018, that's when we started the process. We started at a level with officers, a committee put together, working with the captain and with Captain Bailey, and then Captain Wilkie, and then it kind of went up to me. We did some refinement in that product that you see. So I assume I can go through this. I'll kind of skip through this a little bit, and I'll tell you why, because you've seen a lot of me as we've been working on a jail and a lot of different things as we've been modifying processes. We're well into that right now, by the way, working on hiccups, working on things that are running smoothly. We actually just hired Zana Holloman, who is a new jailer for us, to replace one of the 2 jailers that went to the academy, which actually Jeff Rang graduates on Thursday from the Washington State Training Commission. He was one of our jailers, went to the academy, he graduates on Thursday, so I'll be going down for that graduation. So a lot of exciting changes with that type of stuff. So I did put up here our mission statement, dedicated to community safety and service. That was in existence. You'll see our new patch, which is on that new badge that we didn't have, but then we got real quick for the promotional ceremony. Our OHPD core values, this came about again from starting at a line officer level, moving up, and coming up with some that we felt we could throw our hard work behind. So those are our core values: respect, integrity, professionalism, accountability, and collaboration. That is way too small, but I threw it in there. It's in your packets. It's in the stuff that you've got. It's 5+2, which is not new. I think we actually started this in 2017. 2018, we're full into it. So 5+2 is just simply a program that we have where we ask officers to concentrate on these types of areas. It's really basic police work encapsulated in what you see up there, but it's giving some direction and structure to it. So the 5 are our discretionary areas, so schools, parks, downtown, traffic, and community projects. What I mean by discretionary is the +2 you see there are proactive police work and calls for service. So those are things that we have to do. Calls for service, we respond when somebody calls up 911 or they make a report. Those are given to us. Proactive police work, we're going out and finding stuff. In addition to all that, these other things are important to the community, important to law enforcement. So these are things when you have a downtime on discretionary time where you don't have something else going on, and we've had a lot of officers doing that. By that I mean going to like the senior centers and having lunch with them. We have one officer who's called bingo a couple times for them during a lunch break type of thing. We've had officers going, doing cupcake. Bill sacrificed himself to do a cupcake judging contest at one of our schools. You know, we've graded, along with the fire department, they do that too. We've done judging on door designs at schools. So that kind of thing, that meets school and community type of stuff. We had one of our officers meeting with some downtown association and then also with community block watch groups and people with concerns. So that's what that is, and that's still a big part of our department. whether we tweak it a little bit or not, those are essential things for us. I threw this in again. We've got in the bigger, the full report, you see a lot of photographs of our staff, which is good to look through. Hopefully you have. This is a picture we took in 2017, and I just threw that up there again. Again, I'll say that, you know, I got here in October of 2016, although there was some things within the department that we've been working hard on. We've come a long way, in my opinion. We're a police department with missions. We have different things. We have a lot of different, 40 different staff that have different ideas, so you have to meld those people together, and they've done a great job in this department. Prior to my being here, it was a great department. It just, it's gotten nothing but better. And that goes along with the community too, because I sincerely believe that the community support and the connection that I've seen. I mean, there's nothing prouder for me than driving down that 4th of July parade and with all the people out there cheering and waving, and it was closer than ever this year because of the route. 2018 accomplishments. This is actually not in your book. This is in a different report that you folks will probably be seeing. I'm going to go through these real quick. We established in 2018 a second captain position and promoted 2 sergeants. Started work towards accreditation process, which we're still working on. Worked to modify our animal control process to eliminate some costs, which included modified contract with WAIF. We've done that. Reduced our fleet costs. We've enhanced our training program, which included regularly scheduled in-house training, increased external training. We also established a training sergeant position and obtained a training computer program to track and document training for staff. Now we're going to modify our training again this coming year, this year, and then even further coming up. Just constantly refining it and trying to figure out what's the best program for us. But the key is we still have dedication to providing training. Participation in external teams and task forces related to school safety, missing and endangered children, critical incident investigations. You know, we have one of our detectives who is on the missing, FBI Missing Endangered Child Task Force based out of Everett, where she goes to, I think it's monthly meetings, monthly or bi-monthly. We're just in the final stages of joining up along with Island County to the Skagit County SMART team, which is a critical incident investigation team. And then we participate with NCIS, with Island County, and a lot of different outreach areas. We conducted a Citizens Academy in 2018. In fact, we just had some more conversation as to whether we're going to do that this year or not. So we'll be meeting actually tomorrow to talk about that and see if we can accommodate that or not. We were talking about doing it every other year. We'll see if we can do it more often or not. I'm not sure yet. But I think we did actually it was Sergeant Gravel who took this on and really did a great job. A lot of our officers did some instruction in it, but she did a great job in organizing it. Other functions, tasks, and improvements, including continued positive organizational development. I think 2017 and 2018 were real organizational development years for us. Not that the future ones won't be, but it was really critical to mesh as a cohesive team as much as you can with an organization, especially when a new chief comes in and things change. We're trying to calm down the change a little bit, but we're still working on stuff. Working to create and establish a 5-year strategic plan, and an internal team began this process and will be completed with their input and finalized by the administration. You have that in front of you, or in your packets. Work to find alternate solutions for OHPD housing of inmates. You guys know all about that, and we're right in the middle of it. We've got people with our contract agency, and it's working well. We just have hiccups that we knew we would, that we're solving. Nothing insurmountable. It's what we expected. We partnered with ICON to purchase and install fencing around our rear parking lot to improve safety for staff and security for the facility and property. Working with the mayor and everybody, and I know staff really appreciates that. And actually, I've got a lot of positive citizens' comments about it too. It's like about time type of thing. So we much appreciate that. Just threw that in there, make sure I talked about it, which I did. Strategic plan. I just threw in a few data pieces for you there. I did not bring it, but I know WASPIC, Washington Association of Sheriffs and Police Chiefs, just came out with crime data statistics for 2018. And they get that from every department in the state. So that's not up here, it just came out. But we do have that available. And I believe we had a lower average crime rate than we even did last year based on statistics. I don't have those numbers for you here, though. So on the left, the green is 2016 numbers, total calls for service. You can see they've gone down. The 2018 is 12,670. I can't tell you with defined authority that the calls have been more complex, but I just know over the years, calls tend to take more time. Our call numbers have gone down a little bit, though. Misdemeanor arrests, you can see they've kind of gone up a little. Same with gross misdemeanors. Basically, misdemeanor and gross misdemeanors are both misdemeanors. It's some misdemeanors are classified gross, which is a little bit more serious, but still not at a felony or level. And you can see our felony arrests, at least for Class C, which are the most common, has gone up, although, or Class C, I'm sorry, Class B has gone down and Class A has stayed pretty stable. And then this is the only other data piece I've got, I think, just showing some traffic-related offenses. About the same or down a little bit. And then property crimes has dropped down. Okay. Community involvement, I just want to throw this in. This is a big push of ours really for last year and even in 2017. You know, we had 2 people participating. Brian Bronstein and actually Captain Wilkie did the Bigs for Badges. The year before it was Danielle Arnett and Captain Bailey. They did a great job. It's a big commitment. And I'd asked Bill to do something. He says, sorry, Chief, I got to go meet with my little. And so I couldn't assign him something because he had to do that. I don't know if he was really meeting. I'm assuming he was. But no, it's a large commitment, and they loved it, and the kids love it, and very much appreciate that. Senior center visits, we did a lot of those. Department tours, school visits, Coffee with the Cop. We did that actually 2 or 3 times this year down at Whidbey Coffee, and it's a great place to meet and talk with community members. And these are some photographs related to that those kinds of contexts. And then outstanding service. These are the Officers for Life Saving Award at the end of the year. We had an award ceremony. I won't go through it all again, but you can see on there as letters of recognition, achievements in 2018. I'm not sure how that last person snuck on there, but you know, we try to do that awards banquet every year. We have since I've been here. I don't know if we did, and yeah, we did. We did a Christmas party in 2016. That'll be an annual thing for us. And then some changes. Promotions. Tony Sloak was promoted to sergeant. Bill Wilkie to captain. Jen Gravel was promoted to sergeant. Some recognitions of 10 years of 15 and 20 years of service, which you folks do also, or the mayor does. He comes over with the fleece and the award, the pins. Retirements, we had Terry Sampson, of course, our animal control officer, and Nathan Patterday left, went back to Pullman, I think. Maurice Taylor, and then I don't think he's on there, but Lloyd Carter also retired. I think he's driving a truck right now or something like that. He's enjoying retirement. So that's it. I kept it a lot briefer than this. I put that out there. I'm happy to address anything or answer any questions if anybody has anything.
Questions? Yes, Mayor Pro Tem.
It's not really a question, but a statement. It makes all the difference in building a community when your officers are willing to go out to judge cupcakes, be bigs, have coffee with the cop, and how they interrelate with the CAB program. They've been involved, but generally, many years, it was, well, no, I do my job, I'm tired, I go home. I can understand that, but when that special effort goes out to show you are also part of the community, it makes such a difference. You can ask for anything, and the public will be there, but it is so nice to see you out there and participating with everyone else. You're just not on patrol. You have a life, and you care about the community. So thank you. Please tell the department and the citizen on patrol. You see them around. They've got a great reputation, and it's just wonderful to see the whole thing working together. But putting yourself out there personally does make a huge, huge difference, and thank you so very, very much. That's all.
Yes, Councilor.
Thank you, Mayor.
Zerbe.
Chief, I'll just echo those sentiments. Thank you to you and your team. I have a lot of conversations, and a lot of those conversations are with people in the business community, the chamber, and as Mrs. Lawler alluded to earlier, often those conversations are more complaint-based than compliment-based, and that's just the nature of the beast. But with regards to you and your team, especially the cleanup that you did recently, that's a huge compliment and a huge success story, feel-good story. So if you're watching this and you haven't seen the article in the paper, please log on or find a copy of that. The work that was done recently, really at your direction, to clean up some of the problem areas and deal with some of those problems. It's been a great success story. So stay diligent. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Just, Mayor, one more thing to add real
Sure.
quick on that. So you're going to see our guys out there on bikes. They've been out since Thursday, I think, of last week or Wednesday. Sometimes we'll have two, sometimes we'll have one. And these are the public safety patrols we've talked about. So because summer we have the SROs not committed to the school right now. We have one extra body. We actually are short staff. We still got people in training, but the way we've shifted our staffing allows us to put another guy out there so he can help patrol or he can do that. And we've seen it, and we're going to hear more about people saying those guys are doing a great job down there. And they're visible, fantastic, and that's what we want. I want to remind you and everybody else that those guys are very visible down there. However, we need to remember that, and just today, it smacked me in the face on remembering this, is I've got guys on the street who are doing the calls, some of the hard work on the calls, who are handling those calls, doing those reports, who are just as vital, and I know everybody knows this, but they're not quite as visible sometimes. But they're handling a very vital role, and I've got our detectives who are handling vital investigations. I mean, they're summing up this bank robbery. They did a fantastic job with it, with investigations. And then my record staff and jail staff and my administrative staff, who are all behind the scenes. These guys are great out there on patrol, and I love them. But remember, there's a large support network back behind them. So as people see them, remember that's what makes that possible. So appreciate it. Any other questions?
Councilor Wiesen?
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to follow up on that for a second, Chief. A slide that you kind of glossed over a little bit, property crimes in the city. You have graphs since 2016, took over in October of 2016, and since then the population has increased. We've I think added one officer, maybe
We've
during
now
that
added,
time.
we'll add two once we hire them. We've
Well,
had
we have
stable
one.
since then.
Yeah, absolutely. But I just wanted to point out vandalism down 50%, vehicle prowl down about 40%, roughly, just doing these numbers in my head. Theft down roughly 40%, and burglary down almost 60% in the city, with basically more people and the same amount of officers. So it's not, obviously the people you have, it's what you do with the people you have, right? And so I just wanted to make sure that everybody saw that, because you kind of glanced over that a little bit. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Chief. Nice
Thank you.
report. Thanks. Okay. At this time, we will go to Section 3, our citizen comment period. Citizens at this time may comment on subjects of interest not listed on the agenda or items listed on the consent agenda. To ensure comments are recorded properly, please state your name clearly into the microphone. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes to ensure all citizens have sufficient time to speak. And we have Hal Hubby. Hal?
Good evening, Mayor Severns, members of the City Council. My name is Hal Hovey. I'm a resident of Oak Harbor. I'd like to thank the city staff and all the contractors who worked so hard to make the grand opening of Windjammer Park and the Splash Park such a really rousing success. I work across the street from the park and have been watching everything happen for the last 3.5 years, and I can tell you they were really working hard those last couple of weeks. I get to work pretty early, and they were there when I got to work, and they were still there when I left at the end of the day. They did a great job, and it really made a great venue also for 4th of July celebration, which of course the Chamber, as always, did a fantastic job with that. So I just want to thank everybody involved in that. I think that was great. I understand this fall you're going to plan on kicking off planning for the next phase of Windjammer Park. I'd like to volunteer for any citizen input panels that you may put together for that. But in the meantime, I'd also like to remind the council that we have some fairly pressing needs that may not be able to wait until Phase 2 gets funded. I've talked before about the need for a crosswalk across Bayshore Drive. That has become even more critical now that the crosswalk that used to be on the corner of City Beach Street and Bayshore has been removed. So now the Nearest crosswalk is either a Dock Street over to Flintstone Park, or you have to go up to People's Bank to get into the east side of the park legally. Otherwise, you jaywalk across the Bay Shore. So whether we put a new crosswalk in at Ramali Park, where we've talked about before, or somewhere else, something needs to be done to make it legal and safe for people to cross Bay Shore Drive from the north side of Bay Shore over towards the east side of the park and the ball fields. That's all I have. Thank you very much. And again, thanks everybody for making that such a success.
Thank you, Hal. Anyone else? Citizen comment? Okay. Seeing none, we will then move on to section number 4 on our agenda. Section 4 is consent agenda. We have items A through M on our consent agenda. So anybody, if nobody wishes to remove any of those for discussion, they will be approved as presented. So consent agenda is approved. And welcome, Councilor Heisen.
Thanks.
So at this time, then, we will move on to Section 5. This is mayor, council, and staff comments. I have several things, actually. To begin with, I'd under proclamation and observance, the Whidbey Help House Christmas in July will take place on Saturday, July 13, from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. You can donate at SARS Marketplace, at Hagen's, or at Safeway. Also, Whidbey Help House will be hosting an open house barbecue from 2 p.m. Until 4 p.m. on July 13th. Through June, Help House has distributed 2,570 food baskets that have fed 5,474 people. They have provided 18,019 people with the produce and bakery goods that they receive daily from Hagen's, Safeway, and the commissary, and produce that is donated by several schools and private gardens. Christmas in July is an important event for Help House. The food drives and funds received help us keep the shelves stocked during the summer months when donations normally slow down. So remember that Whidbey Help House Christmas in July take place on Saturday, July 13th from 11 to 2 p.m. Please donate at SARS, Hagen's, or Safeway. You can donate right directly to the Help House on your own if you'd like also. We have new artwork here in our council chambers. The artist is Rainey Lindell, is a self-taught artist born in Idaho. Her 7th grade teacher stirred her creative abilities, and she was soon drawing or coloring everything in sight. In the 8th grade, she entered the National Poster Contest and was awarded an honorable mention. She loves the show that nature puts on, and it inspires her to capture that scene with her oil paintings. The glow of a sunset or sunrise, the warm colors of autumn, and the ever-changing skies are subjects she loves to paint. Wildlife in their natural surroundings has added a great dimension to her art. Rainey lived in Seattle, in the Seattle area for many years, then moved to Coopville in 1994 and became a member of the co-op galleries on the island. Pin Cove Gallery is where her work is on display now and has been for 19 years. She is also a member of Island Artists and Whidbey Allied Artists. She believes that life is good, enjoy it. Thank you, Rainey Lindell. And finally, on the 4th of July, I got to participate in the parade, but before the fireworks started, I started my journey to San Diego, where I got there a little bit late in the evening, got into a room, and then the following morning at 8 a.m. I started about a 20, well, I don't know how many hours it was. I should have done the math. But I had an experience that I'll never forget. was able to take off on a C2 Greyhound with 10 or 9 other folks like myself. There were 8 people from California, city council people. There was another mayor. There was a city police chief in the group. There was a county sheriff in the group. And the Greyhound is designed to land on a carrier. I landed on a carrier. We caught the wire, and I got to experience going from roughly 150 miles an hour to a dead stop in about 3 seconds. So and that earned me a TRAP badge, which I'm proud to show you and tell you about. This is a picture. I'll share it with council of the Theodore Roosevelt. We traveled to just about every place on that carrier, including their place of worship, their exercise places, the many galleys that they eat in. And the Theodore Roosevelt is going to be 50 years old in 2025. So it's kind of hard to believe because it's a massive machine with many people and many moving parts. It towers 20 stories above the water line. The flight deck is 4.5 acres, and we watched many of our F-18s. We had a local squadron there training, and so we were able to watch not only the day operations that day, where we were roughly 20 to 25 feet away from the wing of the aircraft as they were taking off. We were that close, to watch them then come in and catch the hook was another many phenomenal experiences. Each one that comes in, we watched the evening practices. We watched the first day. We watched the evening. We spent time with the admiral on the ship, the commanding officer, the command master chief, and certainly the enlisted people. We had meals with them, got to talk to them, and the experience of landing on the ship is amazing, and then there's taking off from the ship where you catapult off. So it's just the opposite. You're at a dead stop, and all of a sudden, they say between 2 and 3 seconds, you're going 150 miles an hour. And there are parts of your body that move in that process that you don't even realize. What an experience. I learned, on my way back, I was thinking about that whole process and the number of people that make that happen, men and women. And I wondered if it needed to have that. There are roughly 5,000 people on that ship. And it kind of went through my mind, gee, do they really need that many people? And they work 24 hours a day. And believe me, I tried to sleep in a bunk bed, and I had the top bunk, so I was even closer to that flight deck. And I don't know how they sleep, the people that are on there. But they work hard, and they're proud of the fact that they have a number of young people doing that job, 18, 19-year-old people, and they take it very seriously. At the end of the day, what they practice to do is very important, and it was an experience I'll never forget. So I would recommend to council, if you're interested, you could put your name in. You're going to have to fly yourself down to San Diego and back, but the experience is unbelievable. I think Mayor Pro Tem has gotten to experience something similar, and they're happy to be able to. They wish they could show it to everybody, like I experienced, but they certainly are open to elected officials, and they encourage it. thanks for the experience, NAS, and it was amazing. So now I will turn to council and ask council for comments. Yes, Councilor Wassner?
Sure, yeah. I just wanted to thank the chamber and our city staff and everyone involved in the parade and fireworks celebration for 4th of July. Once again, like it is every year, it was amazing. I enjoyed being a part of the parade. It's one of my favorite things to do, and I truly thank everybody that worked really hard in our community to make all of that happen for our citizens and our community to come together. It was really fun. I also wanted to agree with Mr. Hovey's comments on Bayshore. Years ago, probably when I first got on council, I commented that I found it strange that Barrington was 25 miles an hour and Bayshore speed limit is much higher. And I find that odd because there is a lot of foot traffic across Bayshore. And I noticed that because my kids play ball, right? So I'm always at the ball field or am during certain times of the year and always see people playing chicken, crossing, Bayshore on foot where they shouldn't be. So I would agree that if we could come together and find a creative solution or a way, I know that it's complicated when we put crosswalks, and I know that's a process with traffic flow and safety, but I'm willing to help with that too, to maybe come up with a safe solution for foot traffic. A lot of people live there. There's a lot of happening business things, and now the park, I imagine it's just going to be busier and busier. So yes, I'm willing to help with that process as well. Thank you.
Okay, Councilor Servadius.
Thank you, Mayor. We'll all second that. I had made a note. So, Mr. O'Born, if you could get that. I know we've talked about it, but I think it's time to see what our options are there so we can get that on a workshop. And
It's already on the radar, so staff is
perfect.
working on that.
Thank you. And the other thing I'd made a note of, on the first, Anacortes City Council actually approved a contract. It was very interesting, 156,000 euros. So I don't know how that works with currency fluctuation, but they actually approved a contract in euros to extend their fiber line that runs through the water to the bridge. So that's very intriguing as to what that could mean for Oak Harbor. And they actually made a note, Crawley, the company that came here and did a presentation, made a note in the presentation that this is to extend the fiber delivery to Deception Pass to provide service down to Whidbey Island for Oak Harbor. And they spelled harbor with a U, so they're clearly British. At any rate, I'd like to make sure that we're cranking up those dialogues. I know there's been some talk, but we have an IT team that focused on the phone stuff. So if you want the crosswalk, I'd be happy to get involved with the fiber. But to make sure that conversation is ongoing, if they're truly going to lay that and approve that contract on the first, let's make sure we're talking about that with them. Thank you.
Councilor Heisen.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to comment on the Windjammer grand opening. I haven't had a chance to do that yet, and I just wanted to say thank you to the public, to city staff, to all of our contractors. At the celebration of Bailey's playground and the park and the splash pad was fantastic. You made me all misty-eyed with your comments, talking about your memories about growing up here and all the stuff that happened at the park. It was just so wonderful. And ever since then, when I've been out and about, people keep congratulating me. And, me just on behalf of the city, it's like, wow, great job. Thank you so much. And congratulations. It turned out great. And my response is that I did not do that work. So we made hard decisions and I was the bad guy occasionally, but I didn't actually do that work and make that happen. So I want to thank everybody that responded to the open houses and gave us your opinion on what you wanted to see, what you wanted to look like, how you wanted it to function. We did not design that park, the community did. So thank you, all of the many, many people that made that happen. It's beautiful beyond my wildest dreams. I have not been down to check it out since we had the ribbon cutting at the actual facility because I didn't want to spoil it for myself. So I was very pleased. And I drove by several times that weekend and, again, 4th of July weekend, and it's just mobbed. Our whole community went a year without our favorite place to congregate. So I think we're all making up for lost time. It's just been packed every day, which makes me so happy. So thank you, everybody.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. I have several. To add on to Help House, the 3 stores will be running specials on July 13th. They do a lot of 2-for-1, buy, 2 cans get 1 free, or if you buy 2 things of pasta. So they run a lot of specials to Help House too. They have a list of what they need in the community, but generally Help House is spending $6,000 to $7,000 a month just to have the right staples for our population. So without Christmas in July, people forget about it in the summer. You're on vacation and whatever, and they don't think about it till it comes Thanksgiving and Christmas. And people are always so giving during that time, but it's really the summer months. And if you check Seattle, their food banks are closed. So we are highly unusual that we are taking care of our own and would appreciate anything. They can take $5 and make it look like 50. So anything, either cash or canned goods, it is a great opportunity for you to give back and really appreciate it. The Buccaneers, who were at our Big Splash Park, do a fishing derby every year. This year they had 105 children ages 3 to 12. And their family members came and also got a hot dog and a treat. So that's like 275 people they fed. And they had prizes for the best looking pirate boy and girl and the biggest fish, the smallest fish, you name it. So it's a wonderful activity on our waterfront, and how beautiful and lucky we are to have a harbor and a waterfront. The other comment I do is from our AWC conference. The Public Work Trust Fund received $86 million. And I had talked with Kathy Rosen that we could put in a project for that money. And one that was pretty obvious was the fiber optics in our water lines, because it also detects the leaks in the lines. So it is right up the alley. We have a prime project that would really help and have other benefits. So if staff and the council would think about that, maybe we could be one of the first ones to put in for some of that $86 million. And to thank staff for the park, the opening of the park. It took many, many years and a lot of people, but to stand there with all those kids, that's our park. That's the community, that's the heart. The joy in people's faces. That night, Larry and I walked there, and there were people who didn't want to come during the kid part, but they said how beautiful and open it was, and they were just overwhelmed. They just couldn't believe we pulled it off. So thank you, each and every one. I mean, anyone who worked for the city was involved with it. So thank you, thank you, thank you. We did it. We should all hug each other and say thank you, because it took a team effort. So thank you. That's all.
Councilor Wiesner.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, it was certainly an exciting couple of weeks with the Splash Park grand opening and seeing the kids out there playing around. Very exciting, and hats off to all the staff for all the work. I know that last week was certainly very busy down there, and they certainly pulled it off. And to the staff who put together the event, I know they were down there working very early in the morning and had been working on it for weeks and weeks. I certainly appreciate that. As well as the 4th of July was a fantastic event. Well-attended parade. I know I ended up handing out about 3,000 pieces of candy. I know my granddaughter was being quite generous with it, so those of you who got 8 or 10 dum-dums at once, you're welcome. I did want to also, though, get out there that we had another exciting event here in the last couple of weeks, and that is our pool has reopened here in town. And absolutely, yeah, there a lot of volunteers stepped up at the last minute. There was the money to do the improvements wasn't coming in until here just shortly, and so they had to get a lot of work done with volunteer work. I know Home Depot donated several thousands of dollars of materials to help get that thing back open, and so Councilmember Wassinger there, when I was there with my grandkids, they had a great time, and having the pool back open is a big thing for the city. So, exciting few weeks. Not as exciting as the mayor's trip. I'm envious, Mayor, but yes, I just wanted to make sure everybody knew about the pool. Fantastic. Thanks.
Anyone else? Council comments? Okay, that's been exciting. We will now move on to city administrator comments.
Yeah, I think it's already been talked a little bit already, but I think we just can't thank staff enough for the help with the grand opening. And there was a lot of numbers of community volunteers, so people who weren't staff that came out, and family and friends of people with the city, and other people who came out and really made the grand opening a real good community event and a good time to showcase the park, and it was ribbon with it, and all the things went really well. It's kind of hard when we did all this planning and see it come to everything worked well. We had a few hiccups with some of the bands and stuff, but we just went right through it and adjusted with it, and nobody really noticed some of the hiccups that we might have had. So I really want to thank staff and the volunteers, and I want to make a special thanks to Lisa Felix, who really invested a lot of time and was really a key person in making this a wonderful event. So thanks to her. Moving on, I just want to call your attention to the upcoming important city council dates, and we're on our summer schedule, so a few modifications there to make sure you note, like we did today with the modification. So we're going to have a Wednesday council meeting in August, and due to the National Night Out. So just keep that in your calendar, and I'll report more in my monthly report at the workshop.
Okay. Thank you, Blaine, and we'll move on now to section 6, public hearings and meetings. To speak during a scheduled public hearing or meeting, please sign in on the sheet. If you don't, you'll still get an opportunity. To ensure comments are recorded properly, please state your name clearly into the microphone, and please limit your comments to 3 minutes to ensure all citizens have sufficient time to speak. And so item number 6A is Resolution 1916, ballot proposition, sales and use tax to fund specified transportation improvements. And we have our senior planner, Dennis Lefebvre.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, council members. My presentation this evening is going to be relatively short. What I'd like to do is just kind of do a refresher course on how we got to this point, briefly hit the high spots on the resolution that we're going to be discussing this evening, and take direction from council on that. As we all know, the Transportation Benefit District is in state law. It's a quasi-judicial corporation. It's authorized to impose taxes, fees, charges, and tolls, and the revenue that creates can be used for local streets, projects and improvements, including maintenance, which is a key issue. The timeline that we've engaged in for this project, your first look was back in April of 2018. You moved forward in May of 2018, actually created the TBD. We had a series of 3 meetings where you acted as the district, and we did some housekeeping in the first meeting. And the January and February meetings of this year, we actually started talking about funding options and the project list. We did mention city assumption, which was an option that you engaged in March of this year. And at the last 2 workshops in May and June, we did some additional discussion on the funding options. And it was direction at that time to move forward with the 0.2% for the ballot resolution. So tonight we are looking at that ballot resolution, and upon approval, what that will do is place this proposition on the November 5th general election. It will ask for 0.2% sales and use tax on taxable retail sales in the city. And if approved by simple majority of the citizens of Oak Harbor, it would create an estimated revenue of about $966,000 annually. And again, as we've discussed in the past, the revenue that will be created will be utilized to take care of projects that we've identified in our 6-year capital improvement program, as well as the Street Saver Pavement Management System Plan. We also included in your packet a revised project list for the Street Saver Plan as we discussed at our last workshop. I think we've also discussed that that would be linked into a fact sheet so that the public would have an opportunity to see each and every project that we are actually looking to fund with the TBD revenues. The levy would be in effect for 10 years according to state law. Can be renewed also, but it would take another vote of the public to do that. So keeping my comments very brief, we are recommending that a positive motion would read as this slide indicates, and I will conclude my presentation and be here for any questions or discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lefebvre. So before, just make sure nobody here from the public has any input or questions before we address it here with the council. Seeing none, we'll come back. I know that I've had some conversations with a counselor or two. I think at our workshop we had some people that were missing when this was last discussed. I've had some communication with our public, and quite frankly, I'm having some questions myself about timing right now, but I'd like to hear what the council has to say first. And my concerns about timing are the fact that I have been, not just timing, we have to do a sales, a good sales process to get our citizens. One of the conversations I had was, what are we doing trying to fund transit? So I've had more than one citizen actually concerned about our city funding transit when we all know that that's not at all what this is about. So there is a sales process that our citizens have to understand with this. The other thing having to do with timing is additional tax. We are communicating with the Navy pretty well right now about our rates and a potential partnership with them that is exciting to me, which I would certainly like to see happen. And I doubt that that's going to happen this year, but I don't know that it won't. We're going to work as hard as we can on making that happen. But I just, from my chair at this point in time, I have some concerns. But I'd like to hear what council says and the input that I get to move forward. So, Councilor Wiesner?
Thank you, Mayor. So certainly, ultimately it's going to end up to the people, right? But valid concern, the people making a decision without the proper information, it's not fair to them, it's not fair to us, it's just going to cause confusion. So I too am concerned about timing for that. But I do have a couple of, questions for a city administrator and maybe get some clarification, because in a couple of portions of the suggested resolution, it talks about the sales tax and use tax up to 0.2%. And then in a couple of places it talks about it being 0.2%. And it seems like there's no continuity there. Can you maybe address that?
It's definitively 0.2%, so.
Okay, so the places it has up to, it's not really up to, it is 0.2%.
Absolutely.
1%. Because I think we have to be clear with the public, right? I mean, we have to be crystal clear with the public as to exactly what it is they're voting on here. And I think that's a little deceptive if we have that in a couple of areas.
I see that.
So with that said, I guess from my standpoint, I certainly overall support the concept of the resolution because it goes to the people, right? I mean, and this is something that needs to go to the people to vote on. I mean, certainly city services are fairly basic. I mean, we're here to provide public safety. We're here to provide infrastructure. That's what we do, and we try to do that as well as providing, you know, the parks and the recreation that we provide. But infrastructure is a big part of what the city is here to do, and we have been patching our streets and doing without any real long-term maintenance or long-term established source of revenue to be able to forecast the maintenance properly. As our city ages, the streets require more maintenance, and we haven't had the money to fund that. So from that standpoint, all for the concept of getting it to the people to determine if the people decide if they want to spend the additional sales tax on the maintenance of a very basic portion of infrastructure in our city, the streets, to get around. With that said, we have to be able to do it and do it logically and make sure that the public understands exactly what that's for. So I guess in the end, I'm going to toss it back to staff as to whether or not they truly think they can accomplish a reasonable information campaign to get the information about what the resolution, in fact, is going to do, and is create a ballot measure, and that what's that ballot measure going to fund. As we know, the state has a long history of writing ballot measures that are very confusing. So those of us, when we do go to the ballot box, when we see a ballot measure, tend to be very skeptical about whether or not we're reading these ballots right, and thus often we end up seeing votes that we don't quite understand because of the way those are written. So I guess that would be my concern too, and I guess it would really, staff would have to do a little sales pitch on what they can do in order to get that information out in a timely fashion.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. A big stumbling block is the name of it. Transportation, people think of trains and planes, and we don't have that. Transportation to us is just keeping the streets paved and getting rid of the potholes. But that word transportation to most people does not mean paving a street. And so that's a huge hurdle to get over. Councilman Wiesner is right. Most of the writings in your voter pamphlet is, you can't understand the English. You have no idea what they're doing. And we need to be very specific, plain English, with maybe right up front. Transportation doesn't mean moving. It means paving streets and having that, you know, going into that. But the title does not fit how we're using the money. I would not be opposed to helping go to Rotaries or different groups to speak with just a short bullet to say. But if we're not all on the same page and promoting it, then it won't go. But I think if people truly know, you mean I'm finally going to get rid of that pothole, or they're going to widen the street and it's going to be smooth, you know, it's easy to understand, but there isn't any way. We always run out of money, and there's only a certain life to our streets, and we've had a study done now to explain that. So I don't know if there's ever a right timing, but also this isn't a tax just on our citizens. It's anyone coming into the city to buy stuff. I mean, that sales tax is from anyone that comes into town. It's not just on the backs of our citizens. And I think that's a better deal than if you went to car tabs or something else, which is truly just on the people who live here. This is for anyone who comes into town. And that should be promoted, that it's not just you and I going down and grabbing groceries or going to Walmart or whatever. It's sales tax. Anyone who comes into town and pays for sales tax, that goes into the fund. So that's it. Thank you.
Councilor Omberg.
Thank you, Mayor. I can support this ballot measure if the language is changed to something similar to financing city transportation infrastructure projects. It's more specific because it does sound like a bus trip to me, when the way it's written. Thank you.
Councilor Servadius.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't disagree with those comments. I think people get, superficially, they get caught up in the nomenclature. Do we need, Mr. Lefevre, as far as statute? Is Transportation Benefit District part of the statute? I think we could put whatever we want on the ballot as a headline and help write that, and then, but is it required as far as statute to be a TBD, Transportation Benefit District?
It would make it, as far as consistency with what we're looking at in the state law, yes, but I think we have some flexibility in creating our title and adding some of that other wording in there that maybe clarifies what the money will be used for.
Okay, and thank you, and I know I've said this before, thank you for the work you've done on this, and I think this is one of your brainchilds, but I'm not sure. I wholeheartedly support this. It's not so much, no one likes paying taxes, no one especially likes paying more taxes, but I like this for what it does. If you go back in time and you look at Initiative 747, which we talk about every fall, it was an initiative that was passed in 2001 that limits basically annual, in simplistic statement, annual revenue for a city to an increase of 1%. If you do math and you understand compound interest over time, and I'm happy to talk about this every fall when we talk about it, that's almost, what is that? Almost 20 years, 19 years, 18 years, that we as cities and municipalities have lived with this kind of a hamstring budget. And so I've had a lot of conversations. I know we'll have a lot more, and I encourage all of us. I don't think it's just up to staff. It's up to all of us sitting up here. We represent the city to the people. We're that liaison in between. We need to be talking about this initiative or this resolution in this Transportation Benefit District and what it really means. And I think if people know, and we do a good job of communicating as a city, that, well, let me touch on this. Can you touch on the funding, when the funding comes in, how is it, and maybe it's a Patricia question, that's not just swept into the general fund, that's kept very specifically siloed for these transportation, pavement, street improvement projects.
I can at least start the conversation. Maybe Patricia can fill in some of the details, but the Department of Revenue gives us specific requirements on how we account for TBD funds and allocation of those funds for the various projects. Do you have any?
They'll be set up in their own separate project. They won't be intermingled with any of the other funds, like any of our other specialty revenue funds. If we have projects, we'll do what we've done with the rest of them, which is set up a project account to move money out of TBD, and if we match it with any of our own funds, into that project fund.
Okay. So thank you for that. And I think it's important to the public. Once again, they are the ones, if we go this route, they'll be voting on it. So I would encourage the public, please challenge us. Whitby News Times, please challenge us. Every way that I've looked at this, going the sales tax route makes the most sense if we're going to try and get these streets repaired. Unfortunately, we just don't have the funding in the general fund, and that's where it would come from. I mean, we have some streets funds, cap-run funds, but we don't have the funding to do what this city needs to do. And I know there's a lot of folks that get frustrated. They think that there was mismanagement of funds, there was abuse or waste of funds, and I don't think that's the case over the years. I think really we've just don't have the revenue sources that we had in the past. And this is an opportunity when you talk about livability, specifically drivability, but pedestrian-friendly accesses with the inclusion of sidewalks or bike paths. This is an opportunity to really get this town over the next 8 to 10 years, as our city engineer laid out. It's a plan to get all of the streets resurfaced or rebuilt, the ones that need to be, that need significant rebuilding. So please, public, challenge us on this, but also do get involved to get informed exactly what this might, how it would affect your family versus a car tab. I think this is the best route to go, and it will make a significant difference over the next decade to the city if we're able to get it done. Thank you.
Councilor Larson.
Thank you, Mayor. Couple things on this. This is a crucial portion of our infrastructure. And like my esteemed colleague, Councilman Servadius, just pointed out, interest compounds over time. It's not the only thing that compounds over time. The wear and tear on our streets And the fact that we haven't been able to keep up the pace with what that costs to what is required. We had a study done a while ago. We haven't been able to act on that without the funding, so the compound cost of that inaction gets added on to what the status of our roads were at the time that that study was done. It's not popular, it's not tenable, and it's not easy to push for a tax increase. We have approximately 4 months until the ballots are due. During one of our recent workshops, we were handed an information sheet that took me about 1.5 minutes to read and gave a lot of bullet points as to why we need this, how the money is going to be allocated, how it's going to be spent, who is going to benefit from this. And I think that rather than kicking this can further down the roads, which are in need of repair, we need to take action now, and I support this resolution moving forward at this time. Thank you.
Councilor Wassinger?
I too am going to support this. I would argue that it's more like 3 months rather than 4. The ballots actually show up in our mailboxes in October. And I think it's wise to get these facts out before that shows up in the mail. But I also think that this is a fairly straightforward measure. I know you're right that sometimes the ballot measures wordings do get very complicated, confusing, hard to understand when you read them. And I'm hopeful that we can make this very easy to understand when it does show up on a ballot. I think that we should be able to come up with a sheet like you gave us in our workshop, even something more simplified. I think this is fairly easy to explain. So I agree with this. I support this. And I think that 3 months for something like this, it may be enough time to sort of get those facts out if we can all work together and staff and get a little social media and support and groups like has been said. So I support this. Thank you.
Councilor Heisen?
Thank you, Mayor. I think an excellent point that Councilmember Larson made was not just the compound interest, like Councilmember Servades pointed out, but the wear and tear. And the reason our utility rates are increased now is because of decades of city councils kicking the infrastructure can down the road because they didn't want to spend the money or levy those taxes or put those kinds of things out there. So all of that infrastructure has piled up, and now it's time to pay the pipers, as it were. So continuing to put this off is just going to cost down the road. It's just going to keep costing more and more. So we can do the politically palatable thing, or we can do the public safety and infrastructure thing, which is our responsibility. So I have a couple of concerns / suggestions. The language that is in our council packet, Dennis, the City of Oak Harbor Council adopt a resolution, blah, 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 should this proposition be approved. Is that the proposed ballot language, or is that an example?
The ballot language is actually after the body of the resolution.
Right.
Yeah, it would be on
Page 201?
I don't have that number, but it would start out City of Oak Harbor Proposition 1, sales and use tax for transportation improvements.
Yes.
Then it has that paragraph, and then it has, should this proposition be approved, yes, no.
Okay.
That's the wording that I think will be on the ballot itself.
Okay, with all the respect in the world, I have a real problem with that paragraph. In terms of clarity and readability, it doesn't, it says for the purpose of financing, it doesn't specify that this funding will be restricted to this use. It doesn't illustrate how much-ish this is going to cost the average household. I mean, it wouldn't be the proper venue to go into, other options like car tabs, but, it says 10 years and then it specifies a 6-year capital improvement plan. And while I know that that includes the maintenance afterwards, I'm assuming that's 6 years worth of projects and then the additional 4 years would be to maintain. That is not clear. So my concern is that, is the few months that we have, Blaine, I see you with your hand over there, is the few months, I'll wrap up, the few months that we have enough time realistically to iron this out, clarify it, and present it? Because if not, and we need to take some more time with it, I'm okay with that too, even though I just preached about kicking the infrastructure can down the heavily potholed road. But, I mean, if we put this paragraph on the ballot, that's a no-go. It doesn't contain enough information. And it's essential because, the public say like, oh, you can update the security in the utility office, but you can't fill the pothole on my street. And so we need to be very clear about how that works.
All right. Can I kind of speak with some of the issues you're talking about here? City attorney's not here tonight. We do have the ballot propositions due to the county by the August 6th date. So we do have the July 24th meeting. We can put this on an action meeting and take your input and have the city attorney come back and make a modified resolution. So you could continue this tonight. If there's some concerns, and that's what I would probably like to do, and that way we can get the language right, take your input there. So we would continue this item to the July 24th meeting. Hopefully we'll have a quorum there at that special meeting. So it's good to have everybody here. Sometimes with the workshop with not people here, we didn't get all the input, so it's kind of challenging in that way. Then just kind of, I think when I did this before at another city, we called it a pothole tax and just made it really simple because they had a different acronym that was kind of confusing too. So every state does these different acronyms. So just the pothole tax, I think, is what the lay people we want to understand, that this would go to improving potholes. I think our city engineer did a good job at the last workshop in focusing on the plan and focusing on the need. And really this is vital, and our roads are deteriorating faster than we're fixing them right now. Councilmember Servatius did a good job of talking what some of the council members, when I went to a meeting, called it the alligator. So you have that gap between what we can increase for taxes and what inflation is. And so if we don't raise what inflation is, then we're essentially cutting the budget in future dollars. So that kind of answers the question of why we need this need of looking at other alternatives. So we're probably 6 years behind some of our other municipalities that have done this. It's quite prevalent, and there's quite a long list of municipalities that have successfully convinced their constituency and their voters that the need for this type of tax in their community. And so I think we can take that on. I did talk about alternatives, but if you want to go forward with this November, it's your call on that. And if you wanted to talk about other options for other dates, I can give you some information on that too if you want, but it's certainly your call. If there's a unanimous point and the mayor and the council want to move forward, then certainly staff will do their hardest to work with you and council members and provide education material to educate people on on this process. We can't necessarily say vote yes, but certainly as a body of the city and staff, but certainly we can educate them on the need and the vitalness of this revenue.
It is, and those of us in this room understand all that. There's a lot of questions and minutia that's going to have to be condensed into about 10 seconds. And so that's, if staff realistically thinks that we can make that happen, then I'm all for it. In its present proposed form, not so much, but conceptually, it absolutely has my support. So I don't know what my fellow council members want to do, but and the information and the worksheet that staff has put out is excellent. I'm just thinking, as a voter, when I read that paragraph, not having watched all this, what decision am I going to make? And I want to be able to arm people with the best, the best, most accurate information, the clearest direction. That is all.
Mayor Pro Tem.
I think Blaine has another comment first.
Oh.
I think I was asked twice for my opinion, so I'm just going to be blunt with you. I have some trepidation in moving forward this quickly with that, but certainly if that's the will of the council, staff will do their best job to work in educating the community, and we'll see how it goes.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Oborn, what is the payment difference? If we have it with the general election, we save money by putting it on the ballot. If we go to a special election or at a different time, I'm sorry, I didn't find it.
It's all there.
Okay.
Let's just wait for that to be passed out. It's on the second side there. There's one side that has the handout on different costs for different elections. So let's wait for everybody to get that. So currently, if we do it on the November 5th, 2019 election, the cost is estimated between $3,000 and $10,000. It varies because it's a proportionate share of whose other items that are on the ballot, and then it's also a proportionate of the number of ballots cast and the number of ballots sent out. So it varies from election, so I can only give dates. If we were to do the next special election date that we have available, which is February 11th, it's going to be significantly more, somewhere between $15,000 and $35,000 for that election. Cheaper if there's other items on that special election. The next special election date that we have available is April 28th, 2020. It's about the same cost, and then it goes down a little bit with the August 4th, but it depends. There's the August 4th, 2020 election, if we did it in the primary, somewhere between $3,000 and $15,000, and then certainly if we did it a year from now, it'd be pretty much the estimate of what we talk about if we do it in this November. So that kind of gives you an idea of the range there.
Councilor Almberg.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm not for kicking this can down the road indefinitely. That's not my style. I think you know that. If we go forward, I want to go forward to win, and I want to put our best foot forward and the best words. And that marketing starts right here at the council, at the dais. We're on TV right now. The next opportunity is to have the language correctly put on the ballot if we don't have time to do that. I'm not opposed to going for option 4. That puts us down a year. That's kind of kicking the can down 1 year, but if we make a commitment, we're going to do it, we're going to do it. At that time, I think we will also have a closer view of how we're going to line up with the Navy regarding the wastewater treatment plant and the impact that that may have on the taxpayer. I want this to be successful. I don't want to do it just in a hurry and end up with a failure. Thank you.
Councilor Servadius.
Thank you. I think we need to be pretty clear tonight on what direction we want staff to take. And so I'm going to encourage you to assume, at least from my perspective, that we can get this on the November ballot. If it, for some reason, doesn't pass, well, if it passes, it passes. If it doesn't pass, then we have obviously other options here to come back. Ms. Heisen, excellent points on what's been a tough subject, the sewer rates. I went back and looked when we reviewed a study in 2013 when that thing was really kicking off. Oak Harbor sewer system development charge was the lowest, bottom of anybody around. Our sewer rate was right at the bottom. It was lower than any of our surrounding communities, with the exception of Port Townsend, and there was just only a couple of bucks lower. So while that might have seemed great at the time, we know that why that is because we didn't make those incremental adjustments over time for whatever reason, and then we had to take on the project that we took on. We would have taken the project on anyway, but some of the costs associated with it might have been able to been minimized. So I feel the same way about this. We've arrived at another point in time. Mr. Oborn, I'd like to make sure, and I do agree with the language, that I think we need to give that another look before we vote on it. That can happen. You can reach out to us individually to see if we have any strong thoughts, I think, on any wording. We talked about at the workshop, hiring a professional graphic designer, and I know you didn't have this resolution approved. We talked about that last month. I'm hoping there's some conversation or thoughts on who might be able to do that work, so that the second this, if we approve it, the second that's approved, that machine is already, I know we have we have a flyer, but I think we can condense that graphically and textually to make a very effective communication piece. I think also a website, if it's not the city's website or a page on that, like we had the Clean Water website, there should be, I think it's very simple to stand up a basic website that you can point people at. And I don't know on the ballot issue, Mr. Lefevre, if we can include a link to a website on the ballot issue. I would hope that we might be able to. I know a lot of times when I'm trying to decide something, I call my father-in-law because he follows everything possibly political in the state, and I can get a great deal of information from him. But if there's a way to let people know, or if we could include a link to a website, that might be very helpful and would give them more information than they might be able to read just in that one paragraph. And then finally, I don't know if it's allowed, but Channel 10, we've got Wildcat TV, we have Mr. Shelley over there, we've got some great resources that I don't know if that's a use of public funds to work on a ballot issue, or if we're able to communicate, here are your options, the informational piece to communicate the options to the city of Oak Harbor and our citizens. That's another venue that I know gets watched a lot. And so an informational infomercial that would explain what this goes towards, encourage people to get online, to look at the paving. I know it's a massive document that Jim Bridges provided, but to show the schedule of this is when it's coming to your street, if this goes forward, it's very important for people to have that information. So, but I think there's several things we can be doing before the meeting at the end of the month, and then be ready to roll if that's the direction we're going. Thank you.
Councilor Wassinger.
Yes, I agree. I think I'd love to hear what Nikki has to say about what, I know some of this the numbers and the RCWs and the 2/10, I know that a lot of that probably really has to be worded on the actual ballot in the paragraph. I do understand that and understand the reasoning. But if there's also a legal way to make it very understandable, make a sentence or two, if we can, that makes it very clear what the money is being used for, that would be ideal too. So I'm not opposed to waiting to next meeting and see. I know that might be a lot of work, but if Nikki could help us and guide us in the legal, what we have to include on the actual ballot, and make sure that paragraph is really clear, and maybe send us some, ideas or to make that a little more clear and readable for everyone, that would be great. And I also agree with anywhere, and I know we also talk about in here a voter's pamphlet, and so I know a lot of people will use that too, to educate themselves, and I think it's good if we do that, and if that's a way to get a little more clear information too, and like Joel said, if we have a tab on our website for information, that would be a great thing too to get going. Thank you.
Councilor Larson.
Thank you, Mayor. A lot of people have spent a lot of time. This has been a Herculean effort over a long period of time, and we are in the home stretch. I have full faith and confidence in the city staff that over the next couple of weeks, right now we need 8 lines of print, approximately, that are clear, concise, and more palatable than these are now. And I think over the next 2 weeks, with a concerted effort, our city staff can produce that. If not, we have the ability to then say it just doesn't quite pass muster in 2 weeks. So I would like to give them the opportunity to produce that so that we can, at that point, hopefully approve something and then mobilize messaging that will take the efforts of everyone in this room and a lot of people not in this room to get out the message as to what we're trying to do here and why it's so crucial and important. I don't think this is a mad dash or a knee-jerk reaction. I think this is the sprint at the end of a long race that we just need to steel ourselves for and see where we lie in 2 weeks. And I'd be happy to look at some things, some drafts in the meantime, the next couple of weeks, and do what we have to do, or at least I can't speak for everyone here today, is do what I have to do to assist in making this something that we can get behind in 2 weeks and get on the ballot for November. Thank you.
Councillor Wiesner.
Thank you, Mayor. I am absolutely, again, all for getting this in front of the people, so that the people can decide where our priorities go. And certainly, I would hope that they see that, again, the priorities need to be behind our infrastructure and our streets, and we're certainly trying to be proactive by not kicking this can down the road. And the fact that we're having so much discussion about it shows that we're, trying to be proactive. I would certainly say that, Mr. Oborn, your intrepidation, doesn't give me any easy feeling, because the reality is, it just tells me that I have intrepidation about whether or not we can successfully get the message out in time. I feel as though, certainly, at the very least, in the amount of time that we have, we absolutely do have to have a 100% clear ballot measure. If we cannot make this thing 100% crystal clear, we're going to be fighting an uphill battle for the next 3 months. It's imperative that the people understand very clearly what it is they're voting for, because otherwise we're going to get a very unclear message back as to what they want. And so I'm certainly willing to also put forth whatever effort we need to over the next couple of weeks to try and refine this, get this to be something that is palatable, so we can take away the intrepidation from all of us, and be able to look at this and say, this is absolutely 100% perfectly clear what the intent is. The people will be able to read it, understand it, and the message they give us through their vote will be a clear message back to us as to how they want us to deal with it. Certainly, this makes the most sense, right? It taxes the people who use the road, who come to the cities, who goes to the merchants. I've expressed my concern certainly with the how it would affect the merchants, but the reality is, if you can't get to them, you can't spend any money there, right? And so certainly, from a perspective of how can we beef up our infrastructure, how can we stay again ahead of this curve that we're massively behind, like Councilor Servatius pointed out, for the last 18 years. Our hands have been tied. We've not been able to keep up with inflation, much less with the growth of the city because of the ballot measures that had been passed back in '01. The fact that we have the opportunity to spread this around for everybody who uses our streets certainly makes the most sense. But we've got to be crystal clear on that message, just because of the fact that we have intrepidation about our ability to get this message out clearly, other than through the actual ballot measure. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Servatius.
Thank you. One last thought. Mr. Lefevre, you or maybe Nikki, it'll fall on your shoulders. In addition to the paragraph that we see on the ballot measure, there's a description that's often written as well in the handbook that we all get. Have we started drafting that portion, that language, or is that something we think we could have ready in a couple of weeks?
Yes, that's something else that'll be ready,
Okay.
and then it'll come out of Nikki's shop, I'm sure.
All right, thank you.
Okay. So, it sounds to me like we're going to postpone this then until the workshop meeting on the 24th. Right? Okay. And I hope you can all attend. We haven't had the greatest attendance at those, and hopefully you can all.
I will not be there at that meeting.
Okay.
You can call it electronically. I can.
I may not either.
Mayor,
Yes.
One housekeeping item, let's go ahead and make a formal motion to continue the public hearing. So if there's people that want to discuss on that at the next meeting, they can.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that we continue the public hearing on ordinance, or resolution 19-16 ballot proposition sale use tax until the 24th of July.
Second.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. Maybe you could help Carla?
Motion was to continue the public hearing on resolution 19-16, sales use tax. Let's get the title for that, sorry, to July 24th workshop.
Okay, got a motion by Mayor Pro Tem, second by Councilor Wiesner. Any other input or questions? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that passes unanimously. Okay, we will move on to item number 6B, which is resolution number 19-20, adopting the 2019 to 2024 Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Plan. And we have our senior planner, Kak Kamak. Welcome, Kak.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening. Kak Kamak, Senior Planner, here to present the Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Plan. This is the final step in the process. It's been a couple of years in the making. I presented the item at the workshop. However, I'll go through some of the highlights that we did with the update, and I have some maps to share as well. So the plan was last updated in 2009, and some of the changes that we went through in adopting or updating the document this time around is the structure of the document got changed. As we were going through our final steps and going through with the Planning Commission and the Park Board, we did get some comments. The last version was like a reference style document. You just kind of look at it, you kind of jump to certain portions, you read it, and you keep going. But we got some feedback saying they wanted more of the traditional style. So we changed the entire document structure, and you can see the copy that's in the plan has the traditional goals and policies and the analysis and the recommendations at the very end. And they thought that was more readable for the public, and so we kind of changed that. So the structure has definitely changed. Goals, policies, and projects, this was updated with the help of City Council, Planning Commission, and Park Board. We did a joint meeting and updated most of the goals and policies in the plan. The recommended plan was updated. I'll go through some of the details later in some of the slides. The level of service analysis was also updated. Some of our analysis is based on population growth, so that number changes, so we've updated that. And the 6-year implementation plan has also been updated. One of the things that was not updated as part of the plan is the park impact fee. And the reason for doing that, this was discussed when we were discussing the goals and policies and the scope of the update, was that the park impact fee can be discussed with other fees. It's a financial puzzle that you want to kind of take along with other financial issues. And so the council chose to have that be separate. Anything that the council acts on in this plan will not necessarily impact have a change in the park impact fee methodology. These can all be done outside of the planning process, and so that is not considered as part of this update. So some of the highlights, the level of service analysis, this is kind of the nuts and bolts of the parks plan. This is something that can be used to determine whether we have adequate parks that serve our community. It's kind of a standard established nationwide. You can kind of check against it. It's not any kind of a formula or RCW mandate that you have to follow. These are just guidelines that have been picked to kind of just gauge how the community is doing. So we have two kinds of analysis, spatial and ratio. Spatial is whether our parks are located in close proximity to our population. And for neighborhood parks, it's a half-mile service radius, and for community parks, it's a 1-mile service radius. For recreational facilities, we use a ratio-based approach, and this is kind of number of facilities per 1,000 population. And this is an easy way to determine whether we have adequate facilities for the population that we have. So This map is in the park plan. This is the service area for neighborhood parks. All the green areas are areas that have neighborhood parks and are covered by their service. One of the things that we did is we took major streets and used that as a clipping mask to clip the service area so that we can determine the coverage of our neighborhood parks. So if you have, for example, a neighborhood park across Highway 20, even though you're within a half-mile radius, it's not considered the service area just because you have such a major street in between. It's not necessarily safe. So if you use the major streets in Oak Harbor as a clipping mask, you kind of discover that there are some areas that are not served, the white areas basically, and some of these areas are going to be fine without a park service. Some of these are just business and commercial areas. But we do have some areas like the area east of Midway and south of Whidbey Avenue that's a residential neighborhood that doesn't have a neighborhood park. They've got Smith Park, it's across the street, can count towards the service area. But these are just opportunity zones. Anytime you have an opportunity to acquire some parkland in the future at some point, you can look at this map and you'll have a reason to do so. Same with the Scenic Heights area. Yeah, we have the Friend Marsh and we have Windjammer Park, which is close. But if you look at the shape of Scenic Heights, it's just narrow and it could use a neighborhood park as it grows. So these are ways to just identify those opportunity zones. The community parks, the square mile service area of community parks are Windjammer, Volunteer, and Fort Nugent Park. As you can see, the northwest quadrant is an area that we don't have coverage, and our plan does kind of identify that the 70 acres or so that the city is currently in discussion with in acquiring. If we do get that land, if we do acquire it, and if you have a service mile radius of 1 mile, you can see that most of our city gets covered. And this is important because you want that coverage to be spaced out. That's why we do the spatial analysis. That's just less impact on the roads, number of trips people are making with their cars to a recreational facility. If you have them all kind of dispersed in the community, then the impacts are also distributed throughout. This is the ratio-based analysis for the same neighborhood parks and community parks. The standard is 1 acre for every 1,000 in population. For community parks, it's 4 acres. So these are the total acre of parks we have in these categories. If you look at the 2018 level of service, you can see that neighborhood parks is greater than 1, which means we do have more parks than our level of service standard, which is good. But if you look at community parks, we're less than the 4, which means we start to, we are 3.2 acres, 3.6 acres short currently, and if we don't do anything about it, in 2036 we'll be 3.2 acres short. I'm sorry, my bad, 7.8 and 20.6 acres short. And this is without taking into account the possibility that the school district may take the 20 acres in Fort Nugent that they're thinking about, because 20 acres of Fort Nugent is actually school district property. If they have it on the ballot to build a new school and they want to use that, we lose that 20 acres. You can add 20 acres to this, these numbers, so that our current need would jump by 20 acres in 2018 and in 2036. So that's a big need in the community, so it's more important to get that next big community park in the northwest quadrant. This is the recreational facilities level of service analysis, and again, the standards are right here in terms of per thousand, and we can see that we have needs in several categories. Again, these are just standards to compare our recreational facilities against. For example, tennis courts, we need, according to the analysis, we need 6 and 8 of them, but we also know tennis is not that popular for sport in Oak Harbor. So just because the numbers show it, it doesn't mean we have to go out and get them. It's just a way to kind of gauge whether we have adequate facilities or not. So what does the recommended plan have? It talks about neighborhood parks and looking for opportunities in those underserved areas I talked about. Continue the trend of acquiring neighborhood parks as the city grows. It's always a good service to have. Community parks, the need for northwest quadrant, in the northwest quadrant that's captured in the park. It talks a little bit about how you want to go about planning for this big park. If you do acquire the parkland and want to invest in that, you probably want to have somewhat of a public process and get the community involved in it, just similar to how the Windjammer Park integration plan was done. You could do something like that to have a collaborative process in designing the park. Open space, Northeast 7th Avenue wetlands have been highlighted. It was highlighted in the last plan. It's highlighted in this plan as well. It's a great amenity to have in the middle of the city, surrounded by multifamily use and commercial uses, a mix of uses around it. Enhancing Northeast 7th Avenue wetlands would be a great investment for that part of the community. The Gary Oak Grove, which is on the southeast corner of Facama Road and Highway 20. This is the one that has some restrictions on development because it's in the accident potential zone. It's being used as a Gary Oak Grove, and the plan recommends continuing to develop that. I was out there on the parcel a few weeks ago, and there's a nursery of Gary Oaks that's doing really well, and there's also some planting of Gary Oaks that could become a future Smith Park type area. So that area is developing quite well, and it's good to continue to invest in that. Friend Marsh is also a key property that the city benefits from, continuing to invest in that and promoting it as open space or preserving it with natural areas and education panels. That's always a good thing for the community and the kids in the city. Trails. Trails, other than the waterfront trail, we don't have too many trails in Oak Harbor. However, the plan does provide a conceptual plan for the long-term development of trails within Oak Harbor. Some of them include, again, developing that Northeast 7th Avenue wetlands area. The Whidbey Avenue corridor is recognized as an area that could use development for multi-use trails or pedestrian trails. If you look at Whidbey Avenue corridor, you have most of the schools are taking access off of it. We have our fire department that takes access off of it. So Whidbey Avenue is a major east-west corridor that could be improved. Anytime you want to look in that corridor, you want to try and improve some kind of a multi-use trail system in there. Pioneer Way and waterfront area is the event center for the city. A lot of people come down, as you probably noticed in the weekend festivities of 4th of July and also the opening of the Windjammer Park. There's a lot of people that come down to this area and trying to provide easy access and alternate access to this area reduces the trip generation to that area, so less impacts. Trails around the city, this is a long-term trails. This is a conceptual plan. This highlights some of the natural amenities that we have in and around Oak Harbor. You know, Windjammer Park, you have Fort Nugent, and on the west side, you have along West Side Beach, you have Swantown Lake, you have Joseph Whidbey State Park. On the north side, there are some wetlands as well, and 7th Avenue wetlands. If you connect all of them, you have a neat trail system. Now, none of this exists, and it takes a long time to develop, but it's good to have conceptual plans like this. As development occurs, you can ask for segments of multi-use trails to be built. For example, we're currently looking at a preliminary plat on the southwest corner of Haga, Southwest 24th and Highway 20, because we have a plan like this that kind of shows the extension of the trail. When they design the development, we can ask, you know, instead of a 5-foot sidewalk, we can ask for a 10-foot multi-use trail. So these plans help promote that type of development. The park plan has also been connected to the CIP, and so there's a strong connection between the capital improvement plan and the park plan. And the projects that are listed there for the implementation of the 6 years is incorporated into the plan. This is just a detailed breakdown of it, and it's in your in the plan as well. So the adoption process went through the park board, had a discussion at the city council workshop. The planning commission had a couple workshops on it and held a hearing on it. They've recommended approval, and here we are tonight for city council action. I'll be happy to answer any questions, but we recommend that you adopt the plan, the 2019 Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Plan. Any questions, I'll be happy to answer. I recommend opening the hearing, taking public comment, and any questions, I'll be happy to answer. Thank you.
Well, let's conduct that public hearing then at this time. We'll open the hearing on the 2019 Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Plan. And seeing nobody from the public, we'll bring it back here to the council. Any questions or input or? Yes, Councilor Servadius.
Thank you. CAC, thank you for your work on this and the Parks Board and everybody that's had input. One of my favorite quotes is the best way to predict the future is to create it. And that starts with planning and really ends with planning and implementation. And interesting story, I had somebody walking through my neighborhood recently, and I knew that they lived in Coupeville, actually south of Coupeville. I thought it was odd to see them walking, just strolling up the street hand in hand, having a walk. And so I asked them, what are you doing here? Yeah, I mean, I know them. And I said, oh, we recently moved to Oak Harbor and we're just out exploring. And they'd wandered all the way down the waterfront trail, crossed over Scenic Heights, found their way into my neighborhood. And they said, is there any way to get across, how do you cross 20 and get over to like Fort Nugent? And I said, well, funny you should ask. Go back down the street. There's a little, wander past these condos and you'll find a trail that takes you right there to the intersection. And then I went on to describe the possible trail vision that the city has. And it was very fun to watch them get excited and for me to be excited to just explore that possibility and say someday maybe like the Burt Gilman or the Tommy Thompson or something, we'll be able to tell people, the Oak Harbor Loop or whatever, and you can walk it as far as you want, and maybe there's some ways to shorten that loop. But very excited about that work and everything you're doing, so thank you.
Yes, Councilor Wassinger.
If there's no other comments, I will move to adopt Resolution 19-20, adopting the 2019 through 2024 Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Plan.
Second.
Okay, got a motion and a second to adopt Resolution 1920, adopting the 2019 to 2024 Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Plan. Motion by Councilor Wassinger, second by Mayor Pro Tem Munns. Any other questions or input? Okay, seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, it passes unanimously. That will then move us on to Section 9, under other items for consideration, intent to commence annexation proceedings, Forbes property. CAC, you got that one also?
Yes, I do.
All
Thank
right.
you, Mayor. So Forbes annexation, we discussed this at the workshop. These are 3 properties, have a location map. To give you bearings, this is Heller Road, this is Crosby, so heading out of town. This is Airline Way, and the properties that have requested for annexation are 3 properties right along Airline Way over here. So the annexation process always begins with the property owners writing to the mayor and the city council and requesting annexation. RCW say when you receive such a letter, you should hold a public meeting within 60 days, and that's exactly what we're doing right now. We received the letter in May, and we're holding this public meeting. And RCW gives us some guidance on how we should look at annexations and what we should consider. And the things to consider are whether the city council will accept, reject, or geographically modify the area. This is entirely up to the city council's choice in determining whether you want to proceed with this process or not. It's not something that's mandated. If they meet criteria that you have to do this, it is entirely up to the council's choice. While considering annexation, the RCWs also say consider zoning. What kind of zoning do you want to have for this property? And also whether the properties will buy into all the indebtedness that the city has. So I'll start with the easiest one at the bottom, whether the properties should take on the city's indebtedness, and the answer is yes. That's fairly straightforward unless unique circumstances. Most properties that get annexed share in that. The zoning option here, and I'll go into that a little bit more when I discuss some of the challenges of the property, but when we went with the 2016 update, we changed our land use classifications that can handle more than one zoning category. And so this is a low-density residential land use that can support either R1, R2, or R3 zoning. So the applicant has a choice, and I'll identify some of the challenges of this property and why maybe a higher zoning could be beneficial for the property owner, but it is their choice depending on what they want to do. Whether the council will accept, reject, or geographically modify the proposed annexation, here's where we kind of start to discuss some of the development options and what are the challenges with that. From the surface, this property has utilities. The utilities are at West Meadows, so they can be extended to this property for connection and service. Stormwater is a little more challenging. The property flows towards the north, and I have some maps that hopefully will help with that. So go back to this aerial. So the lowest point of the property is north, and and here are the wetlands. There's some wetlands here, and there's some wetlands here. That's it kind of the grade flows from here through the ditch, and it goes out this road all the way to the sound. So any stormwater that leaves this property is going to probably go to this low point and then catch this ditch and go out. The challenge comes in this ditch and whether it has enough capacity to convey whatever water that this development may generate all the way to the sound. And this is challenging because this ditch is in the county, and the maintenance of the ditch is up in the air in terms of how it's maintained, who has access to the ditch, how is it maintained. All of these are questions. So any development that happens on this property will have to deal with that. They'll have to identify a way to get that water out to the Puget Sound. And that could be a challenge because it's in the county and they're dealing with property owners that may be willing or not willing to cooperate. The transportation, there's some challenges with that as well. Street improvements, anytime there's subdivision, applicant wants to subdivide the property to have any development, there are subdivision requirements that require street frontages, sidewalks, utilities, and so on. These could have potential impacts on the development. And plus, if you look at the map, and go back to the map, so this is all county. You have county speeds coming through here, and then it changes to city. This curve is kind of dangerous. So this intersection, any development that happens here, most of the trips are going to go through that intersection. When people are coming back to that development, they're going to make that left turn. So that intersection will be impacted by any development that's here. And so they'd have to look at that as well. So that's an additional thing that they'd have to study. The shape of this property having so much frontage on two streets, one Airline Way and one Crosby Avenue, and anytime they want to subdivide this property, they're going to have to improve all of those street frontages. So it's, for linear properties, it's always challenging for the amount of street frontage they have to do as part of a subdivision and the number of units that they can get. So it's a numbers thing that they'll have to figure out. Critical areas and buffers. So I pointed out a couple wetlands in the area, and I'll go back to, and this is a map from Island County. You can see that there's wetlands here, and that wetland is pretty close to the properties that are requesting annexation. Oop. Sorry. Here's another map. This is a critical area interactive map from Island County. And as you can see, the wetland touches there, and what I've outlined in this purple is the property that are requesting annexation. So any development on this property is going to require them to do a wetland study and wildlife study as well. And depending on how the wetlands are rated, they will have to observe buffers from the wetland. So you can see how adding buffers to this wetland, first they'll have to delineate it, it'll start to get on this property and also start to limit what can be developed. So these are some of the challenges with this property, as much as annexation seems straightforward. So, and with any annexation, we'll always have demands on fire and police services. It's hard to analyze those impacts with individual development, but overall, as we add land to the city, those impacts have to be considered in terms of services. So from a city standpoint, annexing this property is not a problem. We welcome annexation. We want to see this property come in, and we want to see it develop. However, there are some challenges we'd like to point out to them. And some of these challenges, I talked to the applicant's representative, and their intent is to annex to the city and hopefully sell it to somebody that can develop it. The current property owner lives on the property. You can see the house there. The current property owner lives there. They claim that house is entirely on this property, and none of it is in the property that's being annexed. And so they're wanting to sell it. So the best way to convey all of these requirements to any future developer in terms of what they would have to do in order to develop this property is through an annexation agreement. So if we have an annexation agreement with them and outline the fact that they have to deal with stormwater analysis, then anybody that's interested in developing the property will be able to look into these issues prior to purchasing the property and realizing a development potential here. So this is where I wanted to mention quickly zoning. Normally, R1 or R2 zoning is what people prefer. That is the development style that's familiar here, the development to single-family lots or duplexes. For this one, it may be beneficial to be open to an R3 zoning just because of the amount of frontage improvements they'd have to do. If they divide it into individual lots, the city probably doesn't want multiple driveways onto Airline. That's not something normally we allow. We want secondary access. So there's, those kind of requirements start to eat up into how much land can be developed. So going back to the zoning, it'd be good to be open to an R3 zoning if that's what they choose. So what we recommend is to request the annexation, to continue the annexation process, because the city's not opposed to the annexation. We'll be open to the R3 zoning. That is if they choose that that's what they want. Now, R3 zoning has some caveat in it. Once you zone R3, you can't put single-family homes. That's the cutoff. So once you choose the zoning, you're going to go into a higher density. R2 gives them an option between duplex and single-family, but may not give them the density for all the investment they're making. So anyway, we'll leave that option open, and then to have an annexation agreement. So those are the recommendations we say as you move this along, you want them to consider. So I talked to the applicant, or left a message for the applicant. They know about this meeting. They were not able to be here. We recommend as staff to move this annexation along and get into the next step where we'll deal with the annexation agreement. And if all of those things fall into place, we'll come back for the annexation. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have.
See, I don't think there's anybody from the public here, so yes, Councillor Almberg.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to support this. It's not really up to us to decide what the property owner can afford or not afford, or even what their design is. We support our applicants playing on a level playing field, and I think the way this is presented, that lets them take the next step And it's not necessarily at this point, we're not talking about site plan. Thank you.
Yes, Councilor Servadius.
Thank you. Can you bring up a map there, Mr. Kamak? It's a mouthful. I'm sorry, go back one slide, the one you were just on, pink outlines,
Outlines?
purple outline, go
Oh,
back
purple
to
outline.
the other way. So the little chunk just east of the south end of the annex, or possible annex property, that's county. Do you know, I'm trying to look on the map here, there's something there, a house, couple of houses. Were there any conversations to try and, do they even want to have that risk of talking to those property owners and adding them to the mix?
We thought about it, but there are, I think there's a duplex in one of them, and then there are houses on the other. If you add those properties to this annexation, the value of those homes will be greater than the value of the requesting property owners, so that will skew the annexation process.
Right.
So that's why we're not considering them in this annexation.
Okay, just curious. And if we do, and I agree with Mr. Almberg, I want to support these processes. I just worry that should this get annexed, they want to sell it, it may or may not get developed. How much more does that then, it's not a lot of property, but does that continue to add to our woes of undevelopable land within the UGA?
Potential, it's like a market game, you know, at what point does the value of the land come up to the point where it's developable? That's hard to predict, yeah.
Right. Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Other questions or input? So you're looking for a motion?
Yes.
That move to accept, et cetera?
Yes.
Okay.
It's a long
Councilor
motion, but it's,
Wiesner?
yeah.
If nobody has anything else, I'll move to accept the area for annexation as proposed, authorize the circulation of an annex petition for signatories representing no less than 60% of the assessed value, require the adoption of R1 single-family, R2 limited multifamily, or R3 multifamily residential zoning simultaneous with annexation, require the annexed property to share city indebtedness, and require an annexation agreement.
Second.
So we have a motion that reads exactly like the recommended action, and second, motion by Councilor Wiesner, second by Mayor Pro Tem. Any other questions or input? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that passes unanimously. So I think now we are at a point on our agenda to go into executive session. At this time, City Council is going to recess into an executive session as authorized under RCW 42-30-110 to discuss the acquisition of real estate. The executive session will take place in the mayor's conference room and is expected to last approximately 15 minutes. The council is not expected to take action following the executive session. The regular council meeting will reconvene afterwards. So we'll go in there now.
Okay, I'll run out now. Okay, I gotta go.
Leaving, but I'm going to reconvene the meeting before she leaves the room. This is July 9th special meeting of the Oak Harbor City Council. No action was taken in executive session, and I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Been moved and adjourned. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I'm sure there's no opposed. We are now adjourned.